Time now for the Sunday Talk, where we tap into the debate of the week. Tonight, sexism in the U.S. election. After months of disrespectful comments about women, Donald Trump is now being accused of not only bragging about, but actually committing sexual assault. It's become the issue of the campaign.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
You dropped to your knees.
Yes.
It must be a pretty picture you dropped to your knees.
When it comes to Donald Trump's sexist comments about women, there's no shortage.
I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. She's a slob.
Hillary Clinton has used it to her advantage, but it didn't really take off until...
You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab him by the... I can do anything.
For more than 24 Republican lawmakers, that tape was the last straw.
When Mr. Trump attacks women, that is a point where I just have to part company.
I can't look my 15-year-old daughter in the eye and tell her I endorse this person to become the president.
Trump's response?
This was locker room talk. I'm not proud of it.
Have you ever done those things?
Have respect for me. And I will tell you, no, I have not.
Almost an invitation for this.
After hearing the released audio tapes and your denials during the debate, I felt I had to speak out about your behavior.
When he started putting his hand up my skirt, and that was it.
Sort of groping you on the side, on the fly, like you're some sort of, I don't know, stuffed animal on the couch.
8 women have come forward this week. Trump denies it all.
Take a look. You take a look. Look at her. I don't think so.
This is not something that we can ignore.
In the first election where a woman could become president, will how women are treated decide the outcome? I'm joined now by our panelists. Supriya Dwivedi is a political commentator and columnist with the Toronto Sun. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief at Walrus Magazine, and Elamine Abdel-Mahmoud is social media editor at BuzzFeed Canada. So, Supriya, I'll start with you. I mean, is this all just political posturing, or is there real change, real awareness happening here?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think we'd be a little bit remiss if we didn't point out the progress that has been made in recent years when it comes to things like sexual assault reporting and us believing women when they come forward with stories like this. But I also think, you know, had Donald Trump not made previous comments that he's made about Alicia Machado, the former Miss Universe pageant, Megyn Kelly at Fox, Rosie O'Donnell, and we didn't have a litany of you know, sexist history of him going on the record and saying these sorts of things. I don't know if this one straw would have broken the proverbial camel's back, but you know, having 8 women come forward is a pretty big straw.
What do you think, John?
I think what's most shocking is that it's a major party candidate for president, and people look around and they see people defending what Trump said. I think that is actually causing people to question what kind of culture Americans live in. Because usually when this happens, if it's someone in Hollywood, it'll be denounced. But to have tens of millions of Americans actually say they're still going to vote for Trump after what he said, I think people are saying, what is wrong with culture that this could still be an acceptable person to vote for?
So I'm getting the sense you guys don't think that this is like a huge moment in the campaign.
I mean, absolutely is a huge moment in the campaign, but to me, it just seems like political point scoring in terms of attacking Trump at this particular moment. These allegations have been around for months and months. The New York Times published allegations as early as May, but that did not move the needle. So it just seems very strange to me that this is a moment that man in that setup pack can't look his daughter in the eye and say, I can't support Trump anymore.
To be fair,
but he could in May.
You know, the tape does make a world of difference. There is a difference between boasting about it on tape to another person who is also laughing about it. I think that really made it real for a lot of people.
I think what to me is amazing is how political tribalism for most Trump supporters actually is more important to them than basic humanity towards 50% of the human population. Because if you look at the rallies that Trump speaks to, he actually, he'll mock these women. Instead of ignoring the issue, he actually thinks it's a winning issue for him to denigrate these women. And he wouldn't do that if Trump supporters didn't think primarily as political tribalists as opposed to people who are feminists.
Yeah, the receptive audience to this. Right, like the receptive audience to him.
And it has moved the needle a little, but core Trump supporters have apparently not been swayed. It's only been maybe 2 or 3% shift in the polls. That's significant in a tight race, but one would expect a sea change in voting. You'd think he might lose every state if people actually thought of this in a feminist way.
But the female vote, I mean, that there's been a reaction there.
Yeah, there definitely has. And it's interesting to point out that it's actually not just female voters, but female legislators as well. If you look at female GOP congresswomen or senators or gubernatorial candidates, 42% of them have actually stepped away from Trump versus just 17% of sitting GOP men. So I think there is definitely a gender gap because all women can sort of relate to a creepy guy like Trump, whether it's, you know, looking at you the wrong way or actively trying to sexually harass you. I think there's a little bit of sister solidarity there that we're not necessarily seeing in men in the same way.
But even in the men who have shown solidarity, there's been this weird phenomenon that Jeb Bush, to his credit, actually called out Trump for being creepy right from the get-go. But in his tweet a couple of days ago, he said, you know, as someone who has daughters, as someone who has female relatives, I condemn the remarks. You shouldn't have to say that.
Right.
You shouldn't have to say, well, there's an asterisk here that because I have skin in the game because I have female children.
Because I know women sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that shouldn't even be part of what you're tweeting out. So for me, it's just the power of tribalism in American politics supersedes
But is there
basic.
not something happening? I mean, we saw the hashtag not okay. We saw all of these women come forward and say, I get groped, I have been groped, and worse in my lifetime. Haven't you? There is this discussion happening. Is that not some kind of progress?
Certainly we can attribute to this sea change in this campaign in some part to that. But I think for the most part, I'm just mostly surprised that it's political opportunism that made this a story, right? Like, this wasn't a story until Paul Ryan started saying, no, I don't know if I'm going to be associating with this guy anymore, or John McCain. So as these people started to come out, I think networks were forced to report on it a little bit more, but these allegations have been around forever, and the stuff he's been saying has been around forever. So I'm just surprised that it took this to make that a story.
I do think, though, Wendy, with you pointed out hashtags in certain social media movements, but also with the knowing what we know now about Bill Cosby and his accusers and just how many there were, I think this lets people think a little bit with a little bit more ease that this stuff does actually happen, and it's not just some wild-eyed crazy person in the bushes who's it's the people that that actually do it and people that we trust.
In terms of the not okay hashtag, yes, it was popular, but it's primarily popular among the sort of people who use Twitter, which by and large tend to be upper middle class, educated people. There are still lots of people who don't care about the hashtag, and you actually see people still going to Trump rallies with T-shirts that say, life's a bitch, don't vote for one. I saw one T-shirt.
Trump that bitch is another.
Trump that bitch. And there was one, the woman had an arrow pointing to her crotch, which basically said, Trump can fuel me up anytime. The idea being, well, as long as it's an alpha male who's a Republican, that's okay.
But that's a certain segment of the population.
But it's huge. I mean, Trump is still polling over 40%. It's not a fringe candidate.
So the fact that we're all talking about this and that this has been revealed and that he was caught on tape and all of these women who have come forward, I mean, is this encouraging? Is this a sign we've come a long way, baby, or a sign we haven't come anywhere?
I think, like Supriya said earlier, it's a little bit of both. It's very encouraging that this is situated in a moment where we're a bit more articulate about talking about rape culture. We have language for that, and this fits nicely into that. So a lot of people in media are able to use that language to identify what Trump is talking about. And for a very large part of the audience, they're listening to these messages, but 40% of them are not.
I also think the locker room comment hit a nerve for a lot of men I know. And I've actually had conversations with guys saying, does this sound like your locker room? Do people talk about this in your locker room? And actually, I wrote a column for the Post about how in 15 years I've never heard that in the locker room at my gym. But I have heard guys say, actually, I do hear this in my locker room. And sometimes, sometimes these guys don't get called out. I think there's probably a lot more pressure to call out guys when they talk like this in the proverbial locker room now that the scandal's taken place.
You can thank feminists for pointing out rape culture for that, John.
Thank you, feminists, for making me a better person. Actually, I should say that there are columnists who have said that rape culture is a myth. Even if you think the idea of rape culture is overblown, the fact that you've got this guy talking, he knew he was mic'd up. That's the amazing thing. 2005, he's talking to Bush. He knew he was mic'd up. It's very hard to deny that rape culture exists to some extent if this guy's going to talk like that on the mic.
So now that he's been accused of not just bragging about it, but doing it, he's come back by saying, oh, with me it was just words. Bill Clinton's worse, that he was, because he was unfaithful and the way that he treated women. Is that fair game?
No, absolutely not. I mean, he's not on the ballot. Bill Clinton is not on the ballot, and Republicans didn't win this argument against Bill Clinton in the 90s. So I don't know how his strategic team thinks this is going to help now.
But she stood by him and against those women.
Right, but I mean, like, what woman wouldn't, who is going to decide to be the good wife and decide to stay by her husband in that situation, wouldn't necessarily take her husband's side? And I think Hillary's involvement in the way that she treated those women is fair game, and that's definitely something that we should probably be talking about more. And in fact, had this Bill Clinton happen now and not in the 90s, I don't know if Hillary Clinton would be made out to be as sympathetic as a character
so then
in
things
the
are
90s.
Changing.
I'm sorry?
So then things are changing.
Yes, so then yes, I guess, yes. That's
is Bill Clinton's behavior fair game here?
I think it is fair game because it is absolutely true that Hillary Clinton helped her husband out when he was accused of all these things. However, unfortunately for Trump, that was a generation ago, and anybody who still has Clinton derangement syndrome and is never going to vote for Clinton, they're already in Trump's camp. So if you keep prattling on about stuff that happened a generation ago, you're not going to get undecided voters. So I think this is consistent with Trump's strategy in the last few weeks, which he wants to energize the hardcore who come out to his rallies and make him feel good and make him feel like a star. But it's not a winning formula for winning the election.
I just don't think it's fair to be attacking Hillary for what Bill might have done years ago. However, it is fair to attack Hillary and I think comment on what Hillary's been talking about in terms of harassing. Well, he claims that she harassed these women when these allegations first came out. And that is something that is totally worthwhile in terms of putting on the table.
We're almost out of time. I got a couple of minutes. I just want to talk about the latest idea put forward by Donald Trump, now that he's sensing that maybe he's going to lose this thing, is the idea, Supriya, that the whole system is gamed, is rigged against him, and basically saying you should be out there watching on election day to make sure it's not stolen.
This is like the single biggest threat to American democracy. The one thing that the Western world really has and what we take for granted is the peaceful transition of power. And the fact that he's openly, telling his supporters to go to polling places, to arm themselves, and to watch for what he calls, rigged stuff, is absolutely frightening. And I think we should all have a vested interest in making sure that doesn't happen November 9th.
There was a Boston Globe piece yesterday where two Trump supporters were interviewed, and one of them was talking about how there's going to be bloodshed if Hillary wins. So this is very dangerous, and I think you're absolutely right. Like, this is a really, really big threat.
John?
There was someone else I heard interviewed who was saying that they're going to go out to the polling station and they're going to look for Mexicans, they're going to look for Muslims, and they're going to look for anybody who's not speaking American.
Oh, God.
So when you're, whichever party you're voting for, Democrat, Republican, you should speak American on election day, just to avoid trouble.
That's horrific.
Yeah.
So whatever happens in this election, the ugliness is not going to go away.
No, we're just getting started.
It's like toothpaste, right? Once it's out of the tube, you can't get it back in there. I think all that hate and bile is just out there for all of us to sort of see.
And it could divide the Republican Party. You could end up with a rump, legitimate Paul Ryan Republican Party, and you could end up with some Ivanka Trump party. Who knows? Sort of a populist. Could be like a sort of Rob Ford writ large. You could have a three-party system in the United States when this is done.
I was going to say, I think whoever has a job of writing the Clinton victory speech in terms of trying to unite the country together, I mean, they have their job cut out for them.
If that happens, we'll see. Another debate this week. Thanks so much to all of you.
Thank you.